Werewolf movies, you gotta love them. There's just something about watching seemingly normal human beings turn into these hairy beasts with big claws and fangs and watch them rip people apart that horror fans just can't get enough of. I say let the fur and blood fly. And even though I love my throat-ripping goodness, there's one thing I always look forward to in a werewolf movie. The transformation. So sit back, relax, and get ready to sink your teeth into some good old-fashioned hair-raising effects as I talk about my top 5 favorite werewolf transformations. Number 5, The Wolfman. I always think it's important to show respects to the classics. Sure, the special effects aren't as good as what we have nowadays, but this was one of the first films to give us the werewolf genre that we have today, and you gotta give Lon Chaney Jr. the credit he deserves. The character of Larry Talbot is just so damn likable that it makes it all the more tragic when he becomes victim to the werewolf curse. I know the transformation scene is pretty simple compared to many other transformations. Hell, we don't even get to see his face as he starts getting all hairy and wolf-like, but you have to appreciate the time, effort, and patience both from the actor and the makeup crew. Chaney had to stand still for hours on end as they added more hair, did a cross dissolve, and then add a little more hair and do another cross dissolve. I can barely sit still for 2 minutes before I start bouncing my knee around. Such are the wonders of ADD. They also didn't have foam latex back then, it was mainly just putty and hair. I admit we're only seeing his feet and we don't even really get a good shot of the full moon before he starts to turn. But for what they had to work with back then, this is still a damn good transformation. If you don't like older horror movies, that's fine, but you still need to show respect for the godfather of werewolf movies. Black and white horror at its finest. Number 4, Ginger Snaps. We all remember those awkward teenage years. Your older sister goes through puberty, gets hot, gets attacked by a werewolf, and turns into a fucking monster. Everyone's gone through that, right? What I personally love about this transformation is it doesn't just happen all at once. Instead of just going full wolf mode during the full moon, it's a much more gradual turn. The characteristics start coming out slowly as we get closer and closer to the big event. She grows a claw out of her ankle, hair starts appearing on different parts of her body, and a tail starts sprouting from her ass that just continues to grow longer and longer as the movie goes on. And I also love as the closer we get to the full moon, her face becomes more canine-like as her teeth grows and her nose becomes more doggish. Or wolfish, I guess that's more appropriate. And don't worry, we still get a good full body transformation when we finally get to the full moon. Which is awesome in its own right and gives you exactly what you want with skin pulsing, the body just morphing and fangs growing and claws extending. A great transformation on its own, but made more effective with the slow build-up and the gradual transformation as it gets closer and closer to it. I'd like to add that I also like the final form of the werewolf. It's this weird fleshy monstrosity, I don't know why, but it just works for me. Hands down the best werewolf movie to come out in the 2000s. Number 3, Trick or Treat. Now this isn't so much a werewolf movie as it is an anthology movie. A fucking awesome anthology movie that takes place during Halloween. Probably one of the best Halloween movies to come out in a long time. Obviously one of the stories involves a werewolf, but it does involve a major spoiler, so I'm just going to apologize right here. At first in this particular segment it looks like this girl is being stalked by this really creepy guy dressed up like a vampire. Of course, this being a horror anthology, nothing is as it seems. And the spoiler is coming in 3, 2, 1. It turns out the girl wasn't being stalked and she was just luring the guy into her weird werewolf orgy. Now, I have never turned into a werewolf, but according to these women, it's very arousing. And the scene does come off as pretty steamy until you realize what's going on. And it just starts getting more and more crazy from there. This particular transformation gets points for originality. Safe to say this is the first time I've seen this in a werewolf movie. They start ripping their freaking skin off, quite literally revealing the beast within. I'm sure other werewolf movies have done this, but this was the first time I've seen it. And you never forget your first time. The whole anthology was great, but this was by far my favorite segment. Pop it in next Halloween for a film that really fits the holiday. Number 2, The Howling. It actually pains me to put this in the number 2 spot because this is actually my favorite werewolf movie of all time. But since we're only focusing on transformation sequences, here we go. Let's get this out of the way. You've got a husband and wife going to a couple's retreat to try to fix their marriage, only to find out that it's a colony of werewolves. You've got a lot of great werewolf action in this movie. And they're not really the sympathetic werewolves, you know, where it's a victim who just happens to become a monster. These guys are gonna rip your face off and enjoy doing it. Now, when most people think of The Howling, they think of the transformation that happens closer to the end of the movie. And why not? It's a damn good transformation. It's got everything you want in a transformation. Teeth growing, hair growing, claws extending, bubbling flesh. But for me, there's one particular transformation that I like a little more than this one. And once again, it happens during a steamy sex scene. Does that make me a weirdo? Yeah, probably. The main reason I love this scene is because it has this dreamlike quality, and it just slowly starts turning into a nightmare. There have been dozens of transformations throughout film history, but never during the act of sex. And all we can do is sit back and watch as this intimate encounter becomes more and more, well, hairy for lack of a better word. And when you see that clawed hand scratch down that guy's back, oh, it's just such a great moment. And it just ends perfectly with that far-off silhouette and a shot of the full moon. Unforgettable. And number 1 should be no surprise to anybody, American Werewolf in London. What else could I choose? This movie doesn't only have the best transformation in the history of horror, but also one of the best practical effects moments in the history of film, period. I think the werewolf action in its own right is just spectacular. All of it made possible by special effects master Rick Baker. Just look at these effects, and of course you have to marvel at the transformation. This wasn't done in the dark like most werewolf transformations before it. This is in a brightly lit room where you can see it in all its foam latex glory. I'm a practical effects guy, and I will always prefer practical effects in my movies. I know a lot of hard work goes into CGI, but when anybody tries to argue with me that CGI is better than practical effects, this is one of the first scenes I show them. Bring the flesh and blood back to movies, people. This is movie magic at its finest.